Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brownstone. I'm your host, Dr. Michele, and you're listening to Numbers Don't Lie. We learn to get out your feelings to make the best decisions for yourself, your family, and your business. Well, today we have I always say we have a special guest, but I feel like they're all special. They all bring a certain, sprinkle to each episode to help you guys make better decisions, whether you're in HR, you're governing your own entrepreneurship, like you're a solopreneur, you're just getting started. It doesn't matter. We all talk about things that helps you frame data to help you make the next best decision. And sometimes we're talking about policy and how data informs policy. And sometimes we're talking about how data informs policy within your organization and yet the HR perspective. And so we're going to talk about a little bit of that today. My next guest, I actually formally met her like way later after I connected with her, because someone was like, hey, there's someone you should connect with on LinkedIn. And I was like, okay. I didn't know who this person was, as somebody that was local to South Carolina. So I was like, fine. I feel like she might have reached out to me. We might have chatted on LinkedIn a couple of times. So again, this is your reminder. If you're not on LinkedIn, active on LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn. Okay. And that was it. And that was a wrap. I would see her post every now and then. I just knew she lived in South Carolina. I think it was last year or either early this year. Someone else I was in close connection with. It was like, yeah, I'm a add to kind of our accountability group. I was like, okay, cool. I know who you're talking about. I didn't know her. I didn't know what she did. It wasn't so recent that I found out what she did, the field that she was trained in, and the work that she's trying to do. So just know she is very smart. She has software that's helping for those of you that are in HR or own business or business owners and hire people. For those of you that complain about maybe lack of representation or that we have a problem with staffing, this is the person you want to hear from. So I've gone on and on. You're probably like, okay, can you bring her on? Because I want to know what y'all about to be talking about. Okay, I'm gonna be quiet. I'm gonna bring her on. Okay. So without further ado, please welcome to the Numbers Don't Lie stage, Michele Hayward.
Thank you, Dr. Michele. They're going to be so confused today because it's two Black women, both of them named Michele, both of them with one L in the Michele. So she Dr. Michele, I am Michele. So we just gonna keep it simple. But I bring not the sprinkle, that's what y'all young people say. I bring je ne sais quoi. So, je ne sais quoi.
That, but I didn't know if I was gonna lose my audience.
Oh my God. I know how we got connected. I know you don't. Dr. Sade, why a do is how we connected. She's like, no, she's in South Carolina. Her name's Michele. And I was like, her name's Michele. Yeah, she has a PhD. Like, from where? She's like, the University of South Carolina. I'm like, I already don't like her. I already don't like her.
You ain't gotta be like that.
But that's how we originally got connected on LinkedIn from there. So it was very interesting. And it's some other connections in there as well. So it's just been really fun and funny for you to describe. Like, she really don't remember, but it was the pancetta, aka the pandemic. So a lot of things is going on.
Right. We just connecting and meeting people. 2 years later, when we come out, you be like, I met other people. But when you meet people digitally and you never get a chance to meet them person, like in real life, it's kind of like that person, that meeting didn't happen. It's like a distant memory. Like, did I meet them in this lifetime? Like, how did I? Well, fortunately, we're connected for real, for real. So could you introduce yourself, like, for real, tell people like who you are and how you landed in the STEM field? Because that's another thing Michele and I have in common, is that we're both in STEM, different parts of STEM, but we're both team STEM. So could you tell us a little more about yourself?
Sure. I run an early stage tech startup called Positive Hire. Our mission is to connect Black, Latina, and Indigenous women who are experienced scientists, engineers, and technology professionals to management roles. We focus highly in the architecture, engineering, construction industry, or AEC for short. Yeah, like, you focus on architecture, engineering, construction. We just say AEC. And so when we talk about that space specifically, it is truly, truly important to our communities because it's all of our infrastructure. It is our highways, it's our bridges, it's all the buildings around us, including hospitals. People don't realize it's also our drinking water and our air and so many other parts of our infrastructure. And oftentimes people don't understand that, but we really need to be part of those discussions. We need to be part of those design teams, those environmental teams, because they often negatively impact our communities. And so you will often see that I'll talk about AEC in different ways at the intersection of diversity as it often relates to women of color, Black, Latina, Indigenous, as well as multiracial women. So just to sum that up real tightly. Now, how did this all come about? Long time ago in the backwoods of South Carolina. Yeah, it really was the backwoods of South Carolina. But I'm from real South Carolina, if you can't tell by my accent. In 1989, September 21st, to be exact, is when I became a civil engineer. And I was 12 years old at the time, so you do the math. What happened that particular day was Hurricane Hugo, which was a Category 5 hurricane,
I remember that.
hit South Carolina, the shores of Charleston. It destroyed so many homes, so many lives impacted, toppled over 100-year-old trees. But what also made it so memorable to me, my favorite auntie and her family, who lived about 30 minutes from Charleston in a nice new brick home, like 4 or 5 years old, they were in their homes when the hurricane hit and destroyed their home with them in it. And so I didn't understand, how could a nice, strong brick home be destroyed by this bad storm? Because I'm 12 and I don't understand what a hurricane is, a bad storm. What I came to find out, a hurricane is a little bit different than a regular thunderstorm with some wind and some trees and limbs that comes down. And so from there, my interest grew in how do you build stronger or more resilient structures so that they can withstand hurricanes. And so I became a civil engineer, long story short.
Wow, that is quite a journey, because I remember Hurricane Hugo. I remember Hurricane Fran. I remember the flooding that came as a result of it. But because I didn't have the only thing destructive I remember was one of my neighbor's trees. I can't remember which hurricane it was. One of the trees fell on her roof, but it wasn't a big tree at all. So it was able to it was just fine. It just needed to be repaired. So I wasn't surrounded by destruction. So it's like that didn't have a huge impact on me the way it did you, because it was just like everybody was fine. We lost power, we kept it moving. You know what I mean? So that's really interesting how we lived through the same events, but the takeaways were so different.
It is. Even the county that I live in, we weren't impacted. You go one county east, just one county, and I'm literally like 5 miles from that county line. They had flooding, people lost their homes just literally just a few miles away. And so you oftentimes, you're right, is what can you see? And so I was looking at it for months. The news is showing what the impact and the devastation was from that hurricane for me. It was in the news. My cousins were out of school for months. And when they finally went back to school, they had to go to school one full year to try to catch up from the hurricane. Yeah, it was September 21st. They didn't go to school until after, I want to say, January of 1990. Wow. For them to figure out what to do with school. And so I think they went to school all of 1990. They got a winter break. Then they went and finished 91 and started spring of 91 school. And then they had the summer of 1991. They were free again. But yeah, they, it was like, people don't have places to live, long lines for gas, people trying to get ice. You can't cook food, but you can grill. You can grill though, so keep some propane and some charcoal around. And so it's just very, very important that we have us in these conversations. We're on emergency response teams, whether through FEMA or other organizations, but we have to be, as people of color, throughout their entire infrastructure system here in the US.
And I love that you said that, because immediately when you first start talking about why, this area is so important, because it is very easy to forget. Like when you're so used to living and, you know what I mean, like doing things that are so common, you forget that there are experts behind the scenes that make sure these things get done. And if you're in South Carolina, you appreciate the people that make the roads, because South Carolina is known for their horrible roads. But I love that you pointed out how important this area was and how important diversity is, because it just made me think to all those stories and all those history lessons that we didn't learn in school. that I've learned since leaving school about the reason why highway structures are the way they are. The
Yep.
reason why, like, you know, how black neighborhoods were displaced and were
Yep.
used because they wanted a highway to run through them. Had there been representation on in those committees and during those sessions, we would have said, no, this doesn't make sense to do this. You're like, we would have seen right through that. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, you just want to put this because you don't want to go through your neighborhood. So people hate Atlanta traffic, but I'm like, the reason why it is the way it is because they specifically wanted to go through certain neighborhoods.
Yep.
So a lot of those, so for those that are dissatisfied with certain traffic patterns, you can probably blame it on racism. But anywho, I love that you just said that because I don't think people realize how important representation diversity is in certain rooms. So I want to jump down to another question because I feel like it's just right there. So we often hear about Black applicants changing their name. We just talked about this not too long ago, changing their name to be given a fair shot. And I put fair in quotations here because they still got to interview. Or they get, you know what I'm saying? To be given a fair shot at competing for a position. We see them talking about, I've been applying for weeks, months, and hearing nothing back. I've seen it on social media. I've heard someone personally say they're going to do this. And then some of them say on social media, like, as soon as they change your name, they're getting a call back or they get an interview, like, and it's not even like within a week. They were saying it happened so fast that it really
Yep.
draws up red flags of like, this sounds like a lawsuit coming. So why do we still see like workers, like willing workers, because there's always this narrative that people don't want to work. Why do we see why do we see these willing workers willing to go through such great lengths to secure a job, like in 2024? Did you know that data-driven organizations were 19 times more profitable? 19. You heard me right. Perhaps you're asking, what is data-driven and how do I become one of those organizations? I'm so glad you asked. I want you to go take a quiz. It's a simple, quick quiz to help you assess if you are in fact one of those organizations. Head over to mogulbeginnings.com/data into dollars quiz now. That's mogulbeginnings.com. You can just go to mogulbeginnings.com and it'll show you the data into dollars quiz. Take it now. You'll see if you're on your way to 19xing your profitability. You're listening to Numbers Don't Lie on KCCR Cityscape. We hope you're enjoying the tunes and all the jams. Make sure you visit our website over at brownstoneworldwide.com to learn about all things Brownstone. You can check out Brownstone Living Magazine and all the great things that we have on the website, as well as the shop. You just got to head over to the website, brownstoneworldwide.com.
Keeping it locked to KCCR Radio,
my station,
the Brownstone Center. And don't forget, no matter where you go, there we are.
I want to go back to people changing their names.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The biases that still exist in the United States that are inherently built in is critical that we understand and address this. The name will oftentimes in itself make a recruiter or hiring manager decide whether or not they want to interview with the person. This is not unusual. I worked in construction. I will not get calls, but my male coworkers like, oh, well, I told them to call you, or I told them no, so they would go to another male coworker, but the recruiter would never call me, ever. They would be talking about the same role, but that recruiter would never call me. And I have more experience, more education, and I've been in construction longer than the others that they were often calling. And so it's really important that we understand how we are socializing boys and girls as children. And I often talk about this in that we want to see change as women, but what happens is we're socializing boys and girls the exact same way we were socialized in the generations before us. And until you change that socialization, you won't see that change because we're not seeing it fast enough in boomers. Gen X did a little bit better. Millennials are showing up because now they're calling out some of the biases in the workplace. And Gen Z, like, deuces, I'm out. They calling out and they bouncing real quick.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. So going back to your question about why are we doing these things? Why are we changing our names on resumes, hiding our pictures on LinkedIn, locking down our accounts, going by our middle names? Sometimes it is truly just survival. The other part that is out there, and I can't remember the statistics right now, it takes Black people and other people, and some of the other people of color, not all of them, some of the other, longer to get jobs. Longer. So if it takes a white person 6 months, expect a Black person 12 months, if not longer. And so when we look at even unemployment rates, unemployment only tracks people for a certain length of time before they have them drop out of the calculations.
Wow.
And so you're going to see at the onset of any economic downturn, Black and Hispanic, Latino people with the highest unemployment rate. You add in gender, is going to be women first, and it's going to take them longer to get employment, statistically.
So you mentioned something about your own experience, about you being qualified, more qualified, and that's really the case. We see a lot of women being more qualified, overqualified, a lot of ethnic minorities being overqualified because our applications are looked at with more scrutiny. So we are really only applying to the positions where we qualify, as opposed to, you know, white males, they'll be applying for anything and they're given the benefit of the doubt. So for us, we don't have that luxury. So a lot of times we really are more qualified than people that are applying with us. But you were saying you weren't getting a call back, the recruiters weren't, but yet this position remained open.
Exactly.
And we hear that a lot. Like, we're talking about, oh, people don't want to work, we're having shortages. But then we hear on the other hand of, I've been applying for weeks, for like, you know what I'm saying, months, and I haven't got a call back. So something we talked about earlier this year, you were saying there's an estimated 600,000, a shortage of 600,000 engineers by 2027. That's a lot of bodies missing that are needed to maintain our roads, to maintain the infrastructure for water and sewage, all those things. I can't imagine. Listen, I don't even want to go down that road of what the world would look like without these necessary people. But what are some of the biggest challenges and opportunities you see in recruiting this diverse talent? And I think it kind of goes into like the reason people have to change their names. Like, what needs to actually break down for those over 500,000 roles to be filled? And that's just in engineering.
I know. The way organizations culturally are set up, like the culture of organizations have to change. And we often talk about from the top down for sure, but also in the middle. What happens is middle managers now are seeing competition, and they've never had to compete against. So those were the people that did a lot of work that they would never advance, because those are the people that help them shine and get promotions. And so it's very difficult in a lot of organizations to get middle management to buy in to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And so organizations need to focus there as well as just executive buy-in. But once we do that, that individual level of awareness around racism, sexism, and homophobia and other isms needs to be addressed on the individual level within those leaders in the organization as well, because they oftentimes are passing that responsibility over to HR and DEI. When you're making decisions, setting up goals and strategies, KPIs in organizations that are highly biased, without having or taking into account or getting the feedback and opinion of those that are doing the work. And so oftentimes they're separating the need to change at an individual level from business needs and goals. And they are really the same thing. And so it's human change, or change management, as they like to call it in corporate spaces, takes a lot of work and a commitment as well as time. And we're not seeing as many organizations do that. Recently, we saw Microsoft let go some of its DEI people, along with a lot of other organizations. However, we see LVH double down on DEI. They want more shelf space for brands of color. They are looking at succession planning and diversifying their employee numbers by race and gender within their organizations. So organizations that are willing to invest more and understand that it's going to take everybody at different times, at different levels, to make this work is what really needs to happen. And we're not seeing enough organizations do it. Some of them are doing it quietly because they would rather spend the money doing the work than lawsuits. And so don't think because people are quiet they aren't doing the work. Looking to see who's changing or leaving or decreasing in staff may be an indication of them backing out of it. But those that are still launching, sometimes you have and doing the work, launching new programs, you have to go talk to their marginalized or underrepresented employees to get an idea of what may be going on in there. So it's a lot of change management in a corporate term that needs to be going on.
That's really good. Because I like how you point out multiple layers, like that personal layer, but then the culture that is created. Because it's just like when we say systemic racism, people always say, "Well, I'm not racist." That's not what that means. There's layers to this. Like, we individually operate in a system that was created off of a lot of biases. So like people try to say, "Oh, slavery was so long ago." Like, that is true, but the mindsets and the structures that were created still exist. And so I'm really glad that you pointed that out, because we do have a lot of well-meaning people in corporations. Well, that, like, I've worked for really well-meaning people where it's just like they want to see women advance, they want to see people of color advance. But if the whole machine, if the whole room, a whole building is not on one accord with them, they can only advance those women, those people of color, to a certain level. Like, they're like, "Hey, this is all I can do." You know what I mean? And some people will say that, like, "This is all I can do. Like, I can't go further if the system's there." And and that makes me also think about AI, as far as our AI is framed in our world. So if we have naturally biased structures and the way we do things, and whose name gets pulled out the hat when it's time to do an interview, AI literally picks up that pattern and runs with it. So a lot of people don't get that unless you're really trying to combat biases. Like, you have to be intentional. The same we have to do in our real life, you have to do the same thing with AI and technology. It's literally going to imitate what we're already doing. And so when we think about certain names getting called back, well, if the Johns and the Matthews and the Sarahs are typically people that get hired, then when AJ Quan and Shanika's name goes in, it's going to automatically say, "This is not a typical name that we hire." No. And I don't think we're doing that as humans, but the technology is literally doing the same thing. So I just really want people to understand that.
The inherent bias, and this even goes into organizations in architecture, engineering, construction, AEC industry, wanting to utilize the data they currently have for design work. But if the design for that road was to always go through Black neighborhoods, right? Mm-hmm. How are you going to train it not to do that if that's the data that you're telling it to use? Mm-hmm. And so you're sitting there, it's like, no, until you change this bias, you can't, don't even use the data. It's going to take you so long to pull it out until you're not going to have any of it in there, because you are inherently doing this for so many years. And like you said, it takes so much. And so when we go in and talk to organizations, not about the AI, just bias overall, we ask them, because they generally want us to do diversity recruitment. And like, well, hold on, let's talk about this for a minute. Who are the last 10 hires that you have? What was your process for recruiting, for attracting talent? How long does the talent stay? By gender, at intersection of gender and race, education level, job type. And it's really interesting. Like, well, we don't want to talk about it. We never looked at it. But why do you want to do diversity recruitment? Well, our numbers are low. Well, why are your numbers low? We don't know how to do diversity recruitment. Well, how many Black women did you have? Well, we have 4. How many did you have? And how long is the earliest, the newest, most recent hire been here? And the longest usually is less than 2 years. I said, well, who left? Who was a Black woman that left prior, 2 years and a month ago? And so it's a lot of hemming and hawing. You don't want to address the issue. And so it's really important that we look at how they're utilizing the data. And oftentimes I talk about the practices, processes, and procedures, because that is inherently where your biases lie in your organization. Before you can even talk recruitment, let's talk about this. Let me come in. Let us do an assessment of really what's going on. And I love our assessments. Some people don't, because it shows you where you have your biases, because we don't look at just HR, DEI, supplier diversity. We look at your product. Mm-hmm. There's like, well, why do you have to look at a product? And I always tell this one example. It was a General Motors plant in Ohio. A few years ago, pre-COVID, they came out about a racism lawsuit, like a noose being hung in the break room. Black workers had reported the racist acts to HR at that particular plant. Nothing was done. The question becomes now, you bought a GM vehicle from that plant. It's a recall on it. Why? Because people are on the lookout for the racist co-workers that were doing these things. The Black employers are being traumatized. Other people are looking at what's going on, but they're not saying anything because they don't want to get involved. Nobody doing a damn job. So now you're on recall 100,000 vehicles out of this plant that is tied back to racist activities that were going and have been reported to HR. And so when we do our assessment, we're looking at the true totality and impact of biases and racism to other isms in your organization. It's usually much higher than employee turnover, usually much higher than recruitment when it comes to dollars and time and other valuable resource the organization has. And so I always try to dig in deeper, like it's nice that you want to do diversity recruitment. It's impactful when you want to change your practice policies and procedures to remove these biases out. And so I take that stance because usually it dives deeper. But again, people have to be ready and willing to make that change.
That's good. No, that's real good. I don't think people realize how expensive racism is. Like we only think about it in terms of a lawsuit, but I'm like, that's the ones that make it that far. But as far as productivity and all those things, I'm like, it's expensive to treat people poorly in general. Like even just when we think about our healthcare system and infrastructure, it's expensive for people to be poor.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Because we're like the people that actually pay taxes and have the money, we're seeing, you know what I'm saying, our money go not going as far. Taxes may be going up, our money's not going as far because we're literally having to foot the bill for those that cannot pay. So just like, yep. You know what I'm saying? Like it's racism and classism is expensive, and it's not those that suffer the only ones that pay for it. And until like we really get that, we're going to continue to see what we're seeing because it's just like as long as you feel that it doesn't affect you, like those people that kept quiet, it doesn't affect me. So I can just be quiet. I don't have to, you know, as long as I got my job, I can pay, you know, my family. As long as you always feel it doesn't affect you, it doesn't impact you, you're going to continue to stay silent or perpetuate those behaviors. So I'm like, it is very expensive. It is expensive. All right. So Michele, tell these wonderful leaders that need you how they can reach out to you.
Absolutely. The easiest way is LinkedIn, obviously, which many of you may not have thought of, but it's Michele with one L, surprise, surprise. And it's HEYWARD. It'll be the one that says top voice. I'm a top voice on LinkedIn. Surprise again. So definitely connect with me over there. I would love, and just be sure you put in the message Brownstone, so I know where you came from. So definitely let Brownstone or the name of the podcast in your message to me.
I love that. And I'll make sure I include, for those that are watching on a visual experience, that I include the link in the description box so they can just click your LinkedIn profile and go straight to you. For those that are listening, make sure you use Michele Hayward, Positive Hire, top voice. Okay. Mention Brownstone. You heard her here. So thank you guys again for tuning in. I've been your host, Dr. Michele. You can find me on all things Mogul Beginnings. That's MOGUL, Mogul Beginnings. We help you with your data needs. I really want to work with those organizations that need help with their, cleaning up making more of a digitize, that's the word, digitize their process. You know, pen and paper got to go. Sporadic things that got to go. We need organization and those that really want to tell their story and that are helping to impact their community with some type of form of education. So reach out to me on LinkedIn, on all things Mogul Beginnings, at social media, or you can literally just Google Mogul Beginnings. My website will come up and you can reach out to me there. I think that's all. Go check out all things Brownstone as well, brownstoneworldwide.com. You can see more of the podcasters as well as the marketplace and the magazine that's out. Be like 1 year. It's coming up on 1 year when I was on the cover of the magazine. So, you know, I might have to change my profile picture pretty soon to commemorate that 1 year mark. All right, y'all don't listen to me talk enough. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great rest of your day and join us for the next episode of Numbers Don't Lie.